Imagine yourself as a Roman soldier, armor strapped tight, shield heavy on your arm, the sun not yet risen, and the world still wrapped in darkness. You are not heading into battle, not today, but into something many men dreaded more than the clash of swords: the march. For the legions of Rome, marching was not simply a way to move from one battlefield to another. It was a grueling test of endurance, discipline, and survival repeated day after day. And for countless soldiers, the march was more punishing than the war itself. A Roman army on the move was unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. It wasn't just soldiers in a neat column, it was a traveling city. Kitchens smoked with early fires, medics tended to the injured, engineers hauled tools and lumber, while merchants and camp followers trailed behind selling bread, wine, and basic comforts. At the heart of it all were the soldiers themselves, hardened men carrying their lives on their backs. Numbers alone tell the scale of this beast in motion. A typical campaign force might include 13,000 to 14,000 legionaries, the core of Rome's professional army. With them marched another 5,000 to 6,000 auxiliaries, archers from Syria, slingers from Hispania, cavalry from Numidia, and fierce infantry from Germania. Added to these were cooks, slaves, servants, mule drivers, and military laborers, 3,000 to 4,000 more people working in the shadows of the legion's steel. Then came the animals. Between 4,500 and 5,000 mules trudged along under enormous burdens, joined by the horses of cavalrymen, officers, and messengers. By the time you counted every man, beast, and servant, a Roman column on campaign could swell to nearly 30,000 living beings. It stretched across the landscape like a moving wall, a column 8 to 12 kilometers long. Ancient historians described it as a serpent of iron and flesh, and for good reason. The head of the line could be crossing a river while its tail was still tearing down tents from the previous night. That size made it unstoppable in appearance but also dangerously vulnerable. If a single part broke down, the whole machine risked collapsing. And so every march was a feat of discipline and organization more than brute strength. The day began in darkness between the third and fourth watch of the night, around 3 in the morning. The first to leave camp were not legionaries but scouts, elite riders called speculators. They galloped ahead to detect ambushes, test the ground, and check nearby villages for hostile activity. Meanwhile, the camp behind them stirred to life. Centurions blasted their horns, waking their men. Every group of 8 soldiers, known as a contubernium, packed up its leather tent, strapped on armor, checked weapons, and tightened the worn straps of their sandals. Nothing was left to chance. Each legionary carried between 20 and 30 kilograms of gear. On his back he bore his shield, sword, javelins, armor, 3 days' worth of rations, a cooking pot, spare clothing, wooden stakes for fortifications, and digging tools. They were called Marius's mules, a nickname born when Consul Gaius Marius reformed the army centuries earlier, ensuring soldiers carried their own supplies instead of relying on wagons. The weight was crushing, but it allowed the legion to move faster, survive longer, and fight almost anywhere. At the same time, the high command met in a circle of tents. The legatus legionis, military tribunes, and senior engineers reviewed the scouts' reports and selected the day's route. Swamps, rocky passes, and ambush-prone valleys were avoided whenever possible. The priority was simple: keep the march flowing and predictable but never exposed. The entire column depended on these decisions. A wrong choice could doom thousands. Just before sunrise, the march began. But this was not the chaos of soldiers shuffling about or the chatter of men easing the boredom of the road. Rome's army advanced in silence. No laughter, no singing, not even casual talk. Discipline was absolute. Rome moved like a shadow, its presence concealed until it was ready to strike. At the front was the vanguard, the legion's eyes and shield. It wasn't a token group of scouts, but a powerful force of auxiliary cavalry and light infantry chosen for speed and ferocity. These men faced the unknown first, disarming traps, inspecting villages, clearing forests, and fending off enemy skirmishes. They operated kilometers ahead of the main body, sometimes 3 or more, and their survival was the survival of the army. If the vanguard collapsed, panic and slaughter could ripple down the entire column. That's why Rome filled it with seasoned veterans, men hardened by decades of war who could act without waiting for orders. Right behind them came the agrimensors, the military surveyors. Armed with simple tools like ropes, stakes, and the groma, they measured the land and selected the evening's campsite. Their decisions were critical. The chosen ground had to be well-drained, near fresh water, easy to defend, and spacious enough for tens of thousands of men and animals. A mistake could mean a flooded camp, poisoned water, or an open flank for enemy attack. The commander himself marched in the column's center, surrounded by guards and messengers. Orders flowed out from him like veins from a heart. Horsemen sped along the line, delivering signals to the vanguard, the rear guard, or the flanks. This nerve center allowed the column to adapt to sudden terrain changes or threats, without descending into chaos. Then came the main body, the core of the legion. 13,000 soldiers in perfect order, divided into cohorts and centuries. Veterans at the front set the pace. Recruits were kept in the middle to prevent straggling, and the unreliable men marched at the rear under watchful eyes. This was no wide battle formation but a narrow column 2 or 3 men across, winding through valleys and forest trails. Trumpets and horns gave signals, but otherwise silence ruled. The rhythm was relentless, 20 to 30 kilometers each day, no more, no less. Behind them rumbled the impedimenta, the baggage train, the logistical heart of the army. Grain, salt, vinegar, siege tools, spare weapons, maps, medical supplies, tents, and even disassembled catapults. Everything Rome needed to wage war weeks from home. Yet it was also the weakest point. A broken cart or injured mule could stall the entire column. That's why orders around the baggage train were as strict as those of battle itself. Soldiers guarded it fiercely, knowing that without it the legion would starve, weaken, and fall apart. The rear guard closed the march, a line of seasoned auxiliaries ready to meet sudden attacks from behind. They collected stragglers, caught deserters, and prevented panic from spreading if the column was harassed. Rome had learned bitter lessons from disasters like Teutoburg Forest, where 3 legions were annihilated in ambush because their column was too stretched and unprotected. Never again. From then on, the rear guard was as vital as the vanguard. The flanks were watched too. Mobile patrols of light cavalry and infantry rode through forests, scaled hills, and slipped into villages, ensuring no enemy could strike from the sides. Their work was exhausting, often more dangerous than marching itself, but without them the serpent of Rome would have been fatally exposed. Finally, after hours on the road, the legion reached the site chosen that morning. But rest was not allowed. The most grueling task of all still lay ahead, building a fortress from nothing before nightfall. Every soldier grabbed his tools and got to work. A trench 2 meters deep was dug, the soil piled into ramparts and wooden stakes planted to form a wall. 4 gates were marked, guards posted, and inside the camp was laid out in strict order. Officers in the center, troops on the flanks, animals in their pens, warehouses, kitchens, even latrines all in their proper places. The transformation was astonishing. In less than 4 hours, a barren field became a fortified city. It wasn't optional. Even if they stayed only one night, Rome always fortified its camp. This discipline, repeated endlessly, allowed Rome to march anywhere without relying on cities or allies. The legion carried its own fortress with it. When the work was done, soldiers cooked their rations over small fires, ate porridge, dried meat, and sour pasca, and repaired their equipment. The camp grew quiet. Punishments were delivered, orders for the next day announced, and then the night routine began. Watches rotated every 3 hours, passwords were checked at sentry posts, and silence was absolute. The penalty for falling asleep on duty was death, stoned to death by one's own comrades. Brutal, yes, but it ensured the camp never slept unguarded. Even at rest, soldiers lay with shields by their side, swords within reach, sandals ready. Every man knew where to run and what formation to take if the alarm was sounded. The legion was never unprepared. It was never caught by surprise. This was the daily reality of Rome's march. Not glorious charges or heroic duels, but endless weight on weary shoulders, blistered feet, hunger, exhaustion, and the constant demand for discipline. It was routine, relentless, and merciless. And it was this, not the battlefield, that many Roman soldiers feared most. Because the true test of a legionary wasn't whether he could fight, it was whether he could endure.